Premier, given that we know who the final potential builders are of the hospital infrastructure, why can't the public see the tender that they are preparing to try to answer?
We're in negotiations that has not been settled with that final builder. We need to get all the fine details associated with that. We will lay that all out when it's been signed, along with the detail log, stuff that Deloitte did that we used as part of our negotiation when it came to getting the contract. And then, as I said in the House, Nova Scotians will judge whether or not they believe in the direction the government has gone.
But what I'm unclear on, I guess, is as a matter of course, tenders are posted online long before they're awarded. There's a tender website, we can go see those every day. And I understand the argument that the government had made that while we're waiting to get clients settled, we've got to keep these documents closely guarded. But now that you've got the final people in there, nobody else can go in and bid on them. Why can't we see the details of what they're trying to prepare?
Because we haven't signed the contract. There's details associated with that contract that are important to us, and we're negotiating those. If they're not the appropriate ones, then we're not going to sign a contract that doesn't make sense. And we're using the documentation that we had a third party outside tell the benefits of P3 and why some of these projects may be. So we're still in negotiation, even though they've come down to where they are. That final document hasn't been settled, and when it is, we'll certainly share the information with those.
You mean the tender itself, the tender they're trying to respond to is a working document that's live?
No, but the actual details of what they're going to pen and tell us how much this is going to cost and look at, and there's specific aspects of that. The tender documents would come back to us and say, clearly lay out what does this mean, how does this work? And we're ongoing in that process right now. When we sign a contract with whoever the bidder will be and bidder, we will release that along with the documentation we use to get to that point.
I'm sorry, I'm
not entirely clear either.
The tender is the ask, right?
We're sort of talking around it because we haven't seen it, I guess. But the tender documents, the things that spell out what these companies are bidding on, why can't those documents be public?
Well, because part of the P3, if you go back and look at what we're in the midst of negotiating this contract with a P3 bidder. So, for example, it's not uncommon, it's no different with many of our own developments. That we go through this process, we want to lock it down specifically to make sure everything is completely as it is to be. That's the issue and the benefit of the P3. So, for example, in the hospital case, we're talking about where the auction lines are. Where are all of the things associated with that? So a P3 vendor who would come in to look at building this and say, they're experts around when it comes to building this particular hospital that's providing oxygen, says these are where these things have to go. So they would look at that documentation, and we would then determine in that case, what is the specific lockdown form and what does that look like at the end of the day, and we would sign off on it. If you go back and look at public tenders that we typically do, ones you refer to, there's a lot of rework to those. That's been one of the challenges associated with many of our projects. They've not been firmed and locked down at the beginning when that tender's been let, and we've ended up with overruns. We want to make sure as we go through this process that all of if there's issues with, as we laid it out, they need to be clear about those in the front end. And when that has all been settled and all been looked after, we'll share that.
But there must be some details that you're putting in that you're requesting from the people who are bidding on this, though.
There is, but
even if they're not as fulsome as they are in a usual tender process.
There is, and we'll put all. But at the end of the day, what we want to make sure that we're talking about the factual documents that we wrote. One of the things that that's why we work very hard ourselves with the healthcare teams across the province in our own physical infrastructure pieces where we've had to make adjustments as we've gone through. But the P3 model, when we lock it in, we want them to know specifically what we want, and everyone needs to know the full details of it.
Premier, almost very quick turnaround to get the focus report posted online by the government, and I'm just wondering if that was in any way in an effort to address concerns that had it taken the full 14 days, the minister potentially could have been releasing his decision on Christmas Eve.
No, we got better go back to the minister. I don't know the normal details how long it takes. I was told it was posted, but I don't know the normal details. No one has talked to me about Christmas Eve.
Premier, the PCs today talking about human trafficking. They had a woman here whose daughter was a victim of human trafficking, talking about that, who said that she feels that if the bills that the PCs brought in today had been in effect, it's possible that it could have changed her daughter's story, her family's story, and I'm wondering what you say to that and what your impression is of these bills.
Well, first of all, her courage, quite frankly, to tell her story about her own child is extraordinary. The people we need to be listening to as we continue to roll out and continue to deal with this issue. At the same time, we need to make sure that we're putting in place law enforcement agencies who fully understand some of the systems that people are using to get our children out of this country or out of this province across the country, that we find ways to stop, arrest, and prosecute those who are involved in it. The Minister of Justice spoke about the number of police officers we have brought in, looking at also how do we support prosecutors with the whole issue of having to address this. I haven't looked specifically at the two or three bills that were presented today. If there are issues associated with that and how do we support victims, I know that they're working hard at that. But as the Minister said, there's a number of components associated with this. How do we prevent it? How do we ensure that we're supporting people who have to go through the system? And second of all, then what are we doing to help survivors? And I think those are all important, and so those bills will get looked at today as of all the bills that opposition bring in.
Yeah. Do you think that it's possible that your government would support a bill such as the one that's been brought in today? And I won't ask you to speak to it specifically, but a bill that creates a separate set of Crown prosecutors who specifically are trained in human trafficking?
So we deal with, when you look at you have to look at the entire Crown prosecuting officer when you go in. We have some dedicated to sexual assaults. So there may be such a thing as that we would have some who are experts in human trafficking. That's something the Minister would continue to look at, depending as we go through how's the best way that we can deal with and address this issue.
What's your understanding, Premier, of what's going on particularly in Nova Scotia that leads us to be have one of the highest rates of human trafficking in the country?
I think the Minister is better suited to that. He's been following this entire issue. It's alarming for us. It's disheartening, quite frankly. It always amazed me what people will do to our children, either their own children or ours who aren't related to them. It is always shocking to me, to be honest with you. I've said this many times. The most difficult job in government was the Minister of Community Services, who has to deal with some of the challenges that are faced with. They get all the news. They see the worst of us. So one is too many. And all of the issues that we see around the violence associated with and the assaults that are happening to our children, whether it's in human trafficking or whether it's in other aspects of our society, is just completely unacceptable. And we try to do everything we can to help mitigate that and then support those families and those children to get on the path to healing. And I wasn't here earlier, but the woman who came to spoke about her children is part of that journey to continue to make sure that people understand that this issue, much as we talk about it in this house and we know the stats and all that, these are real people. These are families, and we need to do everything we can to ensure that we continue to make sure that we're protecting our kids.
From my understanding, there's no specific program in place right now that's helping people who've been displaced by the fallen crane, unless they're low income. Is there anything that your government can do to help these people who are obviously in a bit of a financial situation right now due to this?
Well, many of them would have their own insurance, so that go back to their insurance company. The Minister of Finance would have expressed that. That's what we've been telling all of those people who have been displaced. Many of them would have insurance that would cover that. Those who haven't, the Minister of Community Services has been responding to those who we support. And then at the same time, we now know we have a claim open with the national government. If there's some things that are uninsurable, they may qualify for some support later on, and that would go through the Minister of Emergency Management Organization.
What about assistance for businesses that have been displaced?
Well, if they have insurance associated with somehow closure affected to that would where it would go. But we have not got to the point of looking at that. What we're doing now is trying to get that crane down and make sure that place is safe. And what we have said to all of our people who are responding, go back to your insurance, fully understand your insurance policy. And if it is an insurable item, if there was the ability to purchase insurance and they chose not to, that would not qualify for federal assistance.
Thank you.
Thank you.